My name is Yelena and I'm 32 years old. For nearly 15 years, every Christmas looked the same for me. Sitting alone, scrolling through social media, watching my whole family laugh together at my grandmother's beach house while I wondered what I had done to be left out. I never got an explanation, never received a kind message, and never heard a single apology. Then last January my grandmother passed away and I didn't even hear it from my family. I found out from a post online. No one called me, no one warned me, and when I drove hours to attend the funeral, I arrived late because no one bothered to tell me the schedule had changed. I quietly sat in the back while my mother avoided looking at me and my sister glanced over like I didn't belong there at all. After the service, I tried to speak to my mother, but she only gave me a cold, distant response as if I had shown up where I wasn't welcome. 3 weeks later, I received a call from a lawyer named Harold Finch, who told me he represented my grandmother and needed to speak with me in private, which surprised me because I never even knew she had a lawyer. That's when I learned she had kept a secret from everyone, including my own mother. She had left me the beach house. I told no one and waited quietly for 11 months, and then on Christmas Eve, when more than 20 relatives arrived expecting their usual holiday stay, they found me standing at the door instead. What happened after that changed my life completely, and before I go on, if you enjoy stories about family struggles and finding your strength, feel free to support the channel and share where you're watching from, because this story truly begins on the day I got that unexpected phone call. The lawyer told me gently but firmly, "Please don't tell anyone in your family about this call," and for a moment I felt like my heart had stopped, wondering if something terrible had happened, but he quickly said there was nothing wrong at all and that, in fact, something very good was about to happen. He explained that my grandmother had left clear instructions and said I would understand one day why everything had to stay private. And the next morning I drove to Raleigh without knowing I was about to receive the one thing my mother had always wanted most. But to explain why this mattered, I have to go back to those Christmas photos that haunted me for years, starting when I was 17 in late 2009, when I saw a picture online of my whole family packed into Grandma Vivian's living room, all smiling, holding gifts, and wearing matching red sweaters while I was nowhere in sight. That night I called my mother to ask why I hadn't been invited, and she brushed it off with an easy excuse, saying they thought I was busy, and every year after that there was always a different reason, like they assumed I was working or that messages didn't go through, and somehow it was always my fault for not showing up. Once, when I was 23, I decided to stop waiting and drove to the beach house without telling anyone, hoping that if I just arrived I would finally be included. But when my mother opened the door she looked shocked, and behind her I heard my sister ask if anyone had even invited me, and suddenly the room went quiet as everyone stared like I had walked into a place I didn't belong. Even though my mother quickly told me to come in, I could feel the cold looks, noticed the whispers that stopped when I passed, and saw how there was no seat saved for me at dinner, so I left the next morning and never tried again. For 15 long years I spent Christmas alone, watching a family that acted like I didn't exist until my grandmother changed everything. And to really understand why my mother pushed me away, you have to know about my father, David Carter, who died when I was only 3 and left me with only small, blurry memories like the smell of paint, the sound of him humming, and the way he lifted me onto his shoulders to make me laugh. He was an artist and a dreamer who cared more about beauty than money, and my mother married him when she was very young, even though her parents and friends didn't approve, and for a while love was enough. But as time passed, his work didn't sell and he couldn't keep steady jobs. And that's when real life began to change everything. They lived in a tiny one-bedroom place with a roof that leaked and a baby who barely slept, and life was never easy, but my parents tried to get by. When I was 3, my father, David, was driving home from an art show that was supposed to be his first real break, when another vehicle ignored a red light and the accident ended his life instantly. Years later, the paintings no one wanted back then became extremely valuable. But money no longer mattered to my mother because what she truly wanted was to forget that part of her life. She married again 2 years later to a man named Richard Mitchell, who was steady, dependable, and offered the kind of safe life she wanted. And when my sister Meredith was born, our family slowly changed. Little by little, my mother began to remove every trace of my real father from our lives, never speaking his name, never showing me his pictures, and always changing the subject when anyone mentioned her first marriage, while I, with my unusual blue-gray eyes that clearly came from him, became a living reminder she couldn't escape. The only person who ever told me the truth was my grandmother Vivian, who once said gently that my mother didn't hate me, but hated what I represented, And I didn't fully understand that until the day I walked into the office of a lawyer named Harold Finch. His office was in an old brick building that felt serious and quiet, and he greeted me kindly before asking me to sit. And as I did, he slid an envelope across the desk and said my grandmother wanted me to read it before we talked about anything else. Inside was a handwritten letter in her familiar, shaky writing, where she told me that I was the only one who never wanted anything from her, that I came to see her simply because I cared, that I stayed with her when she was sick or lonely, and that while others only visited when they needed something, I was there out of love. She wrote that people might question her choice, but she was completely sure about it, and that she was leaving everything to me, including the beach house, and asked me to promise to stop living like I didn't matter. When I finished reading, I looked up at the lawyer with tears in my eyes and quietly asked if it was true, and that's when he confirmed that my grandmother had indeed left the beach house to me. The lawyer confirmed that everything had been left to me, including the house and the land, and explained that my grandmother had prepared the papers years earlier and even updated them more than once to make sure no one could challenge her decision. Then he looked at me seriously and said she had expected people to fight it, but the will was solid and could not be broken. I sat there for a long time holding her letter like it was the only thing keeping me steady, thinking about that beach house, the place where my family celebrated every Christmas without me, took happy photos in matching sweaters, and acted like I didn't exist, and also the same place my mother had wanted for years because it was worth millions. The lawyer then asked if I wanted him to inform my family, and when I thought about all those lonely holidays and all the times I found out I was left out through a screen, I told him not yet, and he nodded as if he had been expecting that answer. He said my grandmother knew I would say that and handed me another small sealed note she had left, which simply told me to take all the time I needed and to show them who I really was when I felt ready. After that, I asked how long it would take to transfer everything, and he said about 3 weeks and promised to keep things quiet, and that's when I told him to move forward. I ended up waiting 11 months, and during that time I realized something important, that patience is not weakness but a smart way to protect yourself. For almost a year I lived 2 different lives, one where I was just Yelena Carter working as an accountant in Raleigh, going to meetings and eating lunch alone at my desk, and another where, in secret, I was becoming the legal owner of a beach house worth millions that my family still believed was theirs. By February, the paperwork was finished and the lawyer gave me the keys, and even after that, the months kept passing with no invitations to family events, not at Easter and not even for my sister's birthday in July, when I saw dozens of photos online of everyone celebrating in the house that now belonged to me, and I saved every single picture just in case I needed proof later. Then in September, while checking my email one ordinary day, I noticed a forwarded message from my great-aunt, my grandmother's younger sister, and that was the moment something new began to unfold. The message turned out to be from a family group chat I had never been included in, where my mother wrote that the beach house needed some work and that she was arranging a contractor and would take care of the cost, which felt strange because she was planning repairs on a house that was no longer hers and didn't even know it. When I called the lawyer to ask what to do, he calmly told me to let it happen and save every receipt, explaining that she was increasing the value of my property for free, and by October the workers came and replaced the roof, painted the deck and updated the kitchen, and my mother ended up spending a large amount of money on improvements to a place she didn't own. I kept copies of every bill and started preparing for what I knew was coming, and on December 23rd I flew to North Carolina with a folder full of papers, and years of quiet hurt turned into one clear decision. A week before Christmas, I had already called the local sheriff's office to report that I owned a house in the Outer Banks and that several people might try to enter it without permission on December 24th. And the deputy I spoke to was calm and professional and asked if I could prove it, which I could because I had the deed, the title, the will, and the tax records ready. We agreed to meet on Christmas Eve morning so he could check everything and be there if needed. And before hanging up, he warned me that family situations are never simple. But I told him they had been using my property for years without my knowledge, so things were already complicated. The night before my flight, my phone rang and it was my Aunt Patty, the only relative who ever really checked on me, and when she gently asked why I was never around and repeated what my mother usually told people, I just said she would understand soon and not to be surprised by whatever happened the next day, and for the first time in months I smiled and told her I was finally going to show up. After that, I packed my bag, went to sleep, and arrived at the beach house the evening of December 23rd, just as the sun was going down, and the new lock opened with the key my lawyer had given me, while my mother's old key no longer worked. I stepped inside, paused in the doorway, and breathed in the familiar smell of the sea and the quiet house, knowing that the next day I would finally stop being invisible. The last time I had been in this house I was 23, not expected and not truly welcome, and I had left before the morning even started. But now I was back and this time the place was mine in every sense. I walked slowly through each room, taking in the stone fireplace in the living room, the newly updated kitchen my mother had unknowingly paid for, and the upstairs bedrooms filled with memories of holidays I had only ever seen in pictures. On the fireplace shelf I found the photo I was looking for, a picture from a few years ago showing everyone in matching red sweaters, smiling and crowded together with Grandma Vivian in the middle looking tired but content, and just like always I wasn't in it. I studied the faces, noticing how my mother stood close to her and how my sister held her child, while the rest of the family filled every space, leaving no room for me just like they always had. I set the frame down where everyone would see it the next day, knowing they would remember that exact moment when things started to change. Then, in my grandmother's old bedroom I found another smaller photo I had never seen before, one of just the two of us sitting on the porch and laughing, taken months before she passed, and I realized she had kept it hidden so I placed it right in the center of the shelf where it belonged. That night I slept in her bed, which was now mine, and woke up early on Christmas Eve to the sound of the ocean, and after a moment of calm I got ready, choosing a deep red sweater like the one my grandmother loved, simple makeup and a quiet confidence I had never felt before. I laid all my papers across the dining table including the will, the deed, tax records and repair bills, along with copies of a notice for each adult in the family. And when the deputy arrived later that morning he checked everything carefully and confirmed that the house was truly mine. He asked one last time if I was sure and I thought about all the lonely holidays and years of being forgotten and told him I had never been more certain. We waited and just before noon I saw the first car appear on the long gravel road and I stood by the upstairs window, watching quietly as the moment I had prepared for finally began. Deputy Webb waited quietly in his patrol car, hidden behind a cluster of trees at the edge of the property, while my mother's silver SUV led a caravan of vehicles up the long driveway, Meredith's white Range Rover, Richard's black BMW and a few more cars packed with aunts, uncles, cousins, their spouses, children, Christmas decorations, luggage and enough food to feed an army. They spilled out of the cars like they owned the place because, in their minds they did. My mother strode toward the front door, keys jangling in her hand, wearing her cream-colored coat and pearls, radiating authority and control as always, with Meredith directing her husband to carry suitcases to the master bedroom, my master bedroom now, while the kids ran ahead shouting and laughing about the beach, about presents, about everything they thought was theirs to enjoy. Behind all the commotion, almost unnoticed, Deputy Webb's patrol car rolled slowly toward the driveway, quiet and patient. I descended the stairs carefully, each creak echoing from the same wooden steps I had tiptoed down 9 years ago, trying to be invisible, trying to belong, but this time I had no intention of hiding. I reached the front door just as my mother tried her key in the lock and it wouldn't turn, and I smiled as I swung the door open. The look on her face when she realized she couldn't get in, the confusion, the shock, was unforgettable. She stood there, key still in hand, mouth halfway open as if to complain, and then she saw me. For 3 silent seconds no one spoke. I rested my hand casually on the doorframe, wearing my grandmother's color, the warm crackle of the fire behind me filling the room with the scent of cinnamon and cedar. "Yelena," my mother's voice cracked. "What are you? How did you get in here?" I didn't step aside. "Good morning, Mom," I said softly. Richard stepped forward, frowning. "The locks must be broken. Let me try." "The locks aren't broken," I said calmly. "They're new. I changed them." Silence fell. Meredith pushed ahead, bewildered. "You changed the locks on Mom's house?" "It's not Mom's house," I replied. My mother laughed, sharp and nervous. "Elena, what are you talking about? This is my property." "It's my property," I said firmly. "It's been mine for 11 months. More silence. And then, behind them all, I saw Deputy Webb step out of his patrol car, ready, calm, and waiting for whatever came next. Deputy Webb waited calmly by his patrol car, observing everything, and Aunt Patty was the first to notice him. "Diane, why is there a police officer here?" she asked, and suddenly all 23 of them turned toward the vehicle, eyes wide, staring as if it had appeared out of nowhere. I gestured to him. "I asked him to come," I said quietly, in case anyone needed help understanding the situation. My mother's expression shifted from confusion to anger almost instantly. "What situation? What are you talking about?" she demanded. I think we should discuss this outside, I said, stepping back and beginning to close the door. Considering this is my home and none of you were invited in. Wait. You can't do this. My mother lunged forward, but I just smiled calmly. Actually, I said, opening the door wider not to let them in but so they could see me clearly. The December wind cut sharp and cold across the porch, and my family clustered together on the steps like lost carolers, children hiding behind their parents, luggage abandoned on the gravel. This is ridiculous, my mother snapped. Richard, call the police. The police are already here, ma'am, Deputy Webb said, stepping up the path with calm authority. I'm Deputy Marcus Webb. I've been asked to assist Miss Carter with a property matter. There is no dispute, my mother yelled. This is my house. With respect, ma'am, Deputy Webb said firmly, it is not. He stood beside me, reviewing the documents as everyone watched. I've examined the deed, the will, and the property records. This house belongs to Yelena Carter. It has for almost a year. I could see the shock ripple through the family. Aunts exchanged nervous glances, uncles shifted uneasily, and Meredith clutched her husband's arm as if for support. That's impossible, she whispered. Grandma would never. She did. I pulled a folder from behind the door, the folder I had prepared 11 months ago. This, I said, holding it up, is a copy of her will, signed, witnessed, and notarized. She left the beach house to me specifically and exclusively. My mother snatched it from my hands, scanning the pages, her face growing pale with every word. This can't be real. She was confused. Her doctor will testify she was fine until 2 weeks before she passed. I stayed calm. She knew exactly what she was doing. Aunt Patty stepped forward, hand over her heart. Elena, Vivian left it to you, she said softly. I nodded at her, the only one in the crowd who had ever asked why I wasn't included in Christmas before. Yes, Aunt Patty. She did. Silence fell heavy and complete. Deputy Webb stepped forward, and the family seemed to part around him like he was a force of nature. Folks, he said in a voice that carried years of experience delivering difficult news. I know this is unexpected, but the law is clear. Ms. Carter is the legal owner of this property. I have personally verified all the documents, Deputy Webb said, his voice steady and calm. Richard cleared his throat nervously. Officer, there must be some mistake. Our family has been using this place for 15 years. Because you didn't have permission, I said firmly, and because I didn't even know it was mine until 11 months ago. Meredith's voice was dripping with disbelief. How convenient, your grandmother kept it a secret. That was her choice, Deputy Webb said, and now it's Miss Carter's choice how to handle it. My mother still clutched the folder, knuckles white. I'm calling a lawyer. This will is fraudulent. My mother would never. Your mother did, I said, meeting her gaze steadily. She also anticipated you would say that, which is why she had Harold Finch, a lawyer with 40 years of experience, prepare it with extra protections to prevent anyone from contesting it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a stack of eviction notices, each sealed and official, one for every adult present. I began handing them out. You have 30 minutes to remove any personal belongings from your vehicles. After that, if you are still on my property, Deputy Webb will escort you off for trespassing. The papers moved slowly from hand to hand. Some read them, some just stared. From the back, my cousin Derek spoke up. Elena, it's Christmas Eve. Can't we talk about this? I shrugged. We could have talked any of the 15 Christmases you spent here without inviting me. I have time now. Do you? No one answered. My mother exploded. You manipulated her. You poisoned her against us. Scheming, ungrateful. I cut her off. When was the last time you visited her, Mom? She faltered mid-sentence. I visited her every Sunday for 5 years. I sat with her when she was scared. I held her hand when she was dying. When was the last time you came? And I don't mean Christmas when you wanted the house. I mean just to see her. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Meredith tried to intervene. That doesn't give you the right to steal our inheritance. I laughed, a sound I barely recognized. You mean the house you've been using for 15 years without asking? The house you spent $12,000 renovating in October without knowing who owned it. Aunt Patty's voice rang out clearly. Diane, when was the last time you invited Yelena to Christmas? My mother whirled toward her. She never wanted to come. She likes being alone. I kept my voice calm. Or maybe I was never told when the gatherings were. Silence fell. 23 people stood frozen, not one meeting my eyes. And then my mother said the words that ended it all. Fine. You want to know why you were never invited? I said quietly, looking at my mother. Because I can't stand to look at you. Every time I see your face, I see him, your father, that useless dreaming artist who ruined my life. The crowd went completely still. 23 people froze in the December cold, their breaths small clouds disappearing into the winter air. Even the children went silent, sensing that something had shifted. Meredith's voice came out strangled. Mom, what are you talking about? My mother's face had gone pale. She stared at her own hands as if they had betrayed her. I didn't mean, she started. That's not what David Carter, I said softly. My father. The man you married before Richard. The man you've been trying to erase for 30 years. Richard stepped forward, face full of confusion. Diane, what is she talking about? My mother couldn't meet his eyes. Aunt Patty spoke, her voice barely a whisper, cutting through the tension. Diane, you excluded your own daughter because of David. You don't understand, my mother shouted, voice cracking. Every time I look at her, I see him. I see all the mistakes I made, all the years I wasted. Aunt Patty's voice sharpened. She didn't choose her father. She didn't choose his eyes. I know that, my mother said, quieter now. I know that. I studied her closely, really looked at the woman who had spent 15 years erasing me, teaching my sister that I was invisible, and making me feel like a ghost in my own family. And what I felt wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was pity. You couldn't forgive a dead man, I said softly, so you punished the only part of him that was still alive. My mother's face crumpled for a moment and I thought she might cry, but she didn't apologize. She never did. I could have destroyed her in front of everyone, named every Christmas she had excluded me, every lie, every time she made me feel invisible, but that wasn't why I was there. I turned away. Deputy Webb, please give them 30 minutes to remove any personal belongings from their vehicles. Then I want everyone off my property. Richard started to protest, but I held firm. 30 minutes. That's more consideration than I've ever been given. Meredith clutched her daughter tightly. Yelena, it's Christmas Eve. You can't just throw us out with nowhere to go. I kept my voice calm. I called ahead yesterday. There are 3 hotels in town with rooms blocked for your family. I'm not trying to ruin anyone's Christmas, I added, letting the words settle in. I'm just finally claiming what's mine. I'm not trying to make anyone suffer, I said, my voice calm but firm. I just want what should have been mine all along, the right to decide who enters my home. Deputy Webb stepped forward, professional and steady. You heard her. 30 minutes. I'll be timing. One by one the family began to move, slow and reluctant. Suitcases were lifted back into trunks, children guided into cars, doors shut with the hollow sound of defeat. My mother stayed on the porch, frozen, staring at me as if she was seeing me for the first time. Yenna, she whispered, please. I met her gaze, the same blue-gray eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. You had 15 years to say please, I said quietly. You chose silence instead. I stepped back inside and closed the door behind me, leaning against it, heart pounding in my chest, listening to the gravel crunch as the cars pulled away, one by one, until silence settled over the house. Then there was a gentle knock. I tensed, expecting my mother again, but when I opened the door, Aunt Patty stood there alone, the other cars already gone down the road. May I? She asked softly, and I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, eyes scanning the familiar rooms with a new understanding. I should have spoken up years ago, she said, voice thick. I asked Diane why you never came. Every year I asked. And she always had an excuse. Yelena likes her space. Yelena has work. Yelena prefers to be alone. And I believed her. She wiped her eyes. That's on me. I should have called you directly. I should have demanded answers. She paused, searching for the words. Why didn't you? Because it was easier not to. Because Diane is convincing. I didn't want to cause conflict. So you chose peace over me? Yes. No excuses, no justification. Just the truth. Patty reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded note. Vivian gave me this 2 months before she passed. She made me promise not to show anyone until after she was gone. I took the paper with trembling hands and unfolded it. In Grandma's handwriting were the words, "Patty, make sure Yelena knows she wasn't imagining things. It was real. Everything she felt was real." Patty looked at me. "She saw everything and she wanted you to know you were never crazy." I answered anyway. Honey," her voice was sweet, careful, the tone she always used when she wanted something. "I think we've had a terrible misunderstanding." "Have we?" I asked. "The holidays get stressful," she continued. "People say things they don't mean. I'm sure we can work this out." "Work what out exactly?" I said, voice steady. "The house, of course," she replied, sweetness mixed with a thin edge. "It has sentimental value for the family. Maybe we can arrange shared ownership. I can handle maintenance." "No," I said firmly. Silence. "Excuse me," she said. "No, Mom. I'm not sharing ownership. I'm not arranging schedules. This is my house. Grandma left it to me." Her tone dropped the sweetness entirely. "You're being unreasonable." "No," I said. "I'm being clear. Being a mother is more than biology, Mom. You taught me that." "What is that supposed to mean?" she asked sharply. "It means you spent 30 years trying to erase a dead man and instead you erased me. And now it's done. I'm done. Yenab, goodbye, Mom." I hung up and immediately blocked her number. For the first time in my life, I ended a conversation with her on my own terms, stopped waiting for an apology that would never come, and felt a weight lift I hadn't realized I was carrying. And yes, some of you may wonder if I ever forgave my mother. I will answer that, but first tell me, do you think people like Diane can truly change, or is that just who they are? Comment change if you believe people can have second chances, or done if you think some patterns can't be broken. No judgment, just curious what you think. Back to the story. In February I made a choice. I asked my company about working remotely and they agreed. Partly because I was good at my job, partly because flexibility had become common. I packed up my Raleigh apartment, loaded my car and drove back to the Outer Banks. The beach house waited for me, empty but full of possibilities. I spent the first week settling in, moving furniture, painting the bedroom a soft gray blue, turning the space into mine instead of a museum of family memories I'd never been part of. One afternoon, while cleaning out a closet in Grandma's old office, I found a box I'd never noticed. Inside were dozens of letters written to family members but never sent. Most were simple notes, thank you cards, birthday greetings, complaints about the weather. But at the bottom I found one envelope addressed to me. Inside was a single page. "For Yelena when she's ready. You don't need their approval to have value. You only need your own. They tried to make you small, but small things don't cast shadows. You were never small. You were waiting for your moment. I hope I'm not there to see it, not because I don't want to be, but because you need to do this alone. When it's over, remember, living well isn't revenge. It's the truth. I love you. Always have." I held the letter for a long time, feeling my grandmother's presence. That weekend Aunt Patty came to visit. We cooked dinner together. Simple, quiet, and for the first time in my life it felt like home. Then in mid-March Meredith showed up unannounced. I was on the porch reading when her white Range Rover pulled up. She sat in the car for a full minute before stepping out, moving slowly, cautiously, like approaching something unfamiliar. "I'm not here to fight," she said. I put my book down. "Then why are you here?" She stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, looking tired and uncertain, none of the polished confidence I remembered. "Can we talk?" I gestured to the empty chair beside me. She climbed the steps and sat stiffly. For a long moment neither of us spoke. "I didn't know how Mom treated you," she finally said. "I mean, I knew she favored me, that was obvious. But I didn't know she actively kept you away." I asked quietly, "Would it have mattered if you knew?" Meredith flinched. "I don't know. That's the honest answer. I studied my sister, my half-sister, the golden child, the one who never had to fight for a place at the table. You never questioned it," I said. "Why? I was never there and you just accepted that." She stared at her hands. "I did. I believed what I was told, that you didn't want to be around us, that you preferred being alone." I asked quietly, "Did it ever make sense to you that your sister would choose to spend every Christmas alone for 15 years? She didn't answer. We both knew she'd never really thought about it. Finally she said, "I'm not ready to have a relationship with you. But I wanted you to know I'm starting to see things differently." That was more than I expected, and I thanked her for saying it in person. She left half an hour later. It wasn't a reunion, but it was something. In the months that followed, I learned what boundaries really were. Not walls but doors with locks, and I decided who got a key. With my mother, it was complete silence. No calls, no texts, no explanations. She'd had 15 years to ask questions and chose not to, so now I chose the same. With Richard, it was one short email a month, polite, distant updates about the house. He'd watched everything for 27 years and done nothing, and I wasn't going to pretend that was love. With Meredith, the door stayed barely open. She sent the occasional message, a photo of her daughter, a comment about the weather. I replied when I felt like it, with no pressure and no expectations. With the rest of the family, it depended. The ones who apologized got answers. The ones who defended my mother got silence. I wasn't keeping score, but I was paying attention. And Aunt Patty, she got the spare key. "You sure?" she asked, holding it like it might explode. "You were the only one who noticed I was missing," I said. "For 15 years. She admitted she should have done more. "You are now," I told her. "That's what matters." She started visiting every other weekend. We walked on the beach, talked about Grandma Vivian, and slowly built something new out of what had been broken. I didn't slam the door on my family, I just stopped holding it open for people who never planned to walk through. There's a difference between isolation and boundaries. Isolation is loneliness. Boundaries are peace. And I was finally learning that difference. That Christmas I hosted, not for 23 people, not for those who'd pretended I didn't exist, but for 4. Aunt Patty came first with a casserole and a bottle of wine. "Vivian's recipe," she said. "I found it in her old cookbook." Then came my 2 closest friends from Raleigh, Beth and Carmen, the women who had been my real family when my own hadn't. They'd driven 3 hours to be there. And finally Marcus, a colleague who'd gone through a divorce and had nowhere else to go. When I invited him, he looked at me like I'd offered him something impossible. "You barely know me," he'd said. "I know what it's like to be alone on Christmas," I told him. "No one should have to be if they don't want to." So there we were, 4 people around a table meant for 12, a fire crackling, candles glowing, the smell of Grandma Vivian's cooking in the air. And on the mantel, her photo, the one of us laughing together, the only picture in this house that had ever truly included me. Aunt Patty lifted her glass. We raised our glasses to Grandma Vivian and to the granddaughter who had reminded us what family really meant. The glasses clinked, the waves crashed outside, and inside the house the conversation flowed easily. No one was careful with their words, no one felt tense, and for the first time in my life I didn't feel like a guest in my own story. I looked around the table at the people who had chosen to be there, who actually wanted me there. "Thank you," I said quietly. Beth squeezed my hand and said, "Thank you for inviting us. This place is beautiful." And it was. But more than that, for the first time it finally felt like it was mine. After everyone went to bed, I stepped out onto the porch. The air was cold and sharp, full of the smell of salt and ocean. The sky was scattered with stars, and somewhere far away a foghorn sounded. I sat in Grandma's old rocking chair, my chair now, and thought about the past year and the 15 years before that, and about who I used to be and who I had become. I used to think forgiveness meant pretending nothing happened, that being strong meant swallowing your pain and smiling anyway. I don't believe that anymore. Some things can't be forgiven, not because you're bitter, but because real forgiveness needs honesty, regret, and change, and some people will never offer those. My mother had called 3 more times since I blocked her, each time from a new number, each time with a different tone, anger, guilt, bargaining, but never once with an apology. And strangely, I didn't hate her. Hate takes energy, and I had already given her enough of my life. What I felt now was quieter, something like pity mixed with acceptance. She was who she was. She made her choices. And now I was finally making mine. Boundaries aren't about punishment. They're about protecting your peace and choosing where your energy goes. I had spent 32 years trying to earn a seat at a table that didn't want me. Now I had my own table. It was smaller, quieter, but everyone there had chosen to be there. No obligations. No resentment. No ghosts. I rocked gently in the chair, listening to the waves, and for the first time in my life I wasn't waiting for anything. I was just present. The next morning as I was cleaning up, I noticed something tucked behind Grandma's photo on the mantel. An envelope, cream-colored, with my name written on it in her handwriting. Underneath it said, "To be read on your first Christmas as the owner." My hands were shaking when I opened it. "My dearest Yelena," she wrote, "if you're reading this, it means you did it. You stopped being invisible. I wish I could be there to see it. I watched for years as your mother tried to erase you and it broke my heart. I should have spoken up. I should have fought harder. But Diane is my daughter and I kept hoping she would change. She didn't and I'm sorry for that. I left you this house because you earned it, not through tricks or schemes like they may say but through love. Simple, honest love that never asked for anything in return. You have your father's eyes, Yelena. Did I ever tell you this? David was a good man. Yes, he was a dreamer and yes, he wasn't very practical. But he was kind. He was honest. He saw beauty where other people didn't. My mother never understood that. All she could see was what she believed she had lost by loving him. And I inherited more than just his eyes. I inherited his heart, his way of seeing the world, and his habit of noticing the small good things most people ignore. People say living well is the best response. I think living true is even better. Be yourself, Yelena. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small again. I love you. I'm proud of you. And wherever I am, I'm still watching over you. I held the letter against my chest and closed my eyes. Thank you, I whispered to the quiet room. The fire was still burning, the waves were still rolling in, and somehow I knew she heard me. Before I finish, I want to share what I've learned from all of this. Not to defend anyone but to understand it. My mother isn't a monster. That would be easier to accept. People are more complicated than that. She married my father when she was very young, full of hope and big dreams. When life became hard, when money was tight, when everything fell apart and he died, she didn't know how to handle the pain. So she turned it into shame. In her mind, loving David became her biggest mistake and I became the reminder of it. Every time she looked at my eyes, she didn't see her daughter. She saw her past and everything she wanted to forget. That doesn't excuse what she did. Nothing excuses 15 years of being pushed away, ignored, and made to feel like I didn't exist. But understanding this finally freed me from the question that followed me my whole life. What did I do wrong? The answer is simple. I did nothing wrong. I was just born into someone else's unfinished pain. As for me, my mistake was being kind without protecting myself. I spent years believing that if I stayed quiet enough, helpful enough, and easy enough, they would finally notice me. They never did. Because the truth is, some people don't want to see you. And no matter how small you make yourself, they still won't. So here's the lesson I learned the hard way. Don't keep watering dead plants. Don't keep knocking on doors that never open. Don't beg for a seat at a table where you're not wanted. Build your own table instead. And that's what I'm doing now, one day at a time. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story touched something in you, leave a comment and tell me your story. Have you ever felt invisible? What did you do about it? And if this story meant something to you, there's another one waiting for you in the description. It's about a woman who gave her family everything. Until one day she finally gave them nothing. Click it and I'll see you there.